My name is Clara, and I am 32 years old. As a freelance graphic designer, my financial situation has been a roller coaster lately. Yesterday, I received a text from my brother Eric that shattered my heart. "The family Christmas party is no place for losers," he wrote, explaining why I wasn't invited this year. The pain was immediate and deep, but something inside me refused to be defeated. I decided right then that this rejection would become my turning point. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around to see how I transformed this painful rejection into the best decision of my life. Growing up in a middle-class family in Boston, I always felt like I was living in a shadow. Not just any shadow, but the enormous shadow cast by my older brother Eric. From the very beginning, Eric was the golden child. He excelled at everything: academic, bringing home perfect report cards, winning science competitions, and eventually landing a scholarship to an Ivy League university. My parents beamed with pride at his every achievement, setting him up as the standard against which I would always be measured. I wasn't like Eric. Where he was methodical and analytical, I was creative and spontaneous. My mind worked in colors, shapes, and designs. I could spend hours sketching or painting, losing myself in the creative process. But in our household, art wasn't considered a viable career path. It was a hobby, something to do in your spare time after completing your real work. "Clara, why can't you be more focused like your brother?" my mother would ask whenever she found me sketching instead of studying. "Eric is going to be a successful businessman someday. What are you going to be, an artist who can't pay her bills?" Those comments stung, but I tried not to let them dampen my passion. Throughout high school, I maintained decent grades while developing my artistic skills. I joined art clubs, entered design competitions, and even won a few local awards. But my achievements in the creative field were always downplayed at home. "That's nice, dear," my father would say with a dismissive pat on my shoulder before quickly turning the conversation back to Eric's latest accomplishment. When college application time came, the tension in our household reached new heights. My parents expected me to follow Eric's path into business or law, but I was determined to pursue a degree in graphic design. The arguments were endless and exhausting. "You're throwing away your future," my father declared when I showed him the art school brochures. "What kind of stable career can you possibly have with that degree?" my mother lamented. Despite their disapproval, I stood my ground. Using scholarship money and student loans, I enrolled in a reputable design program across the country. The distance from my family was both painful and liberating. For the first time, I could fully immerse myself in my passion without constant comparison to Eric. College years were transformative. I thrived in the creative environment, developing my unique style and building a portfolio I was proud of. I made friends who understood and appreciated my artistic sensibilities. For once, I felt like I belonged. After graduation, I decided not to return to Boston. Instead, I moved to a city with a vibrant art scene and began building my career as a freelance designer. The early years were tough. Freelancing meant inconsistent income, long hours, and constant hustling for new clients. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, ate ramen noodles more often than I'd like to admit, and worried about making rent each month. Meanwhile, Eric had graduated with honors and landed a high-paying job at a prestigious financial firm. He bought a house in an upscale Boston suburb, drove a luxury car, and began dating the daughter of his boss. My parents couldn't have been prouder. Family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable for me. Every holiday, every reunion, the same questions would surface. "Still doing that drawing thing?" my uncle would ask. "When are you going to get a real job with benefits?" My grandmother would inquire with genuine concern. "You know, Eric's company is hiring administrative assistants," my mother would suggest, as if that was the best I could hope for. Christmas gatherings were particularly painful. They were grand affairs at my parents' house with expensive decorations and lavish gifts. Eric would arrive with his girlfriend, now wife, both dressed impeccably, and bearing presents that showcased their financial success. I would bring thoughtful, handmade gifts that were received with polite but underwhelming appreciation. How creative, they would say, setting aside my carefully crafted presents to admire the expensive store-bought items Eric had selected. Last Christmas was especially difficult. I had just lost a major client and was struggling financially more than usual. Eric spent the entire evening talking about his recent promotion, the bonus he received, and the vacation home they were considering purchasing. When I mentioned a small design project I was excited about, my father cut me off to ask Eric more about his new position. Later that evening, I overheard my mother talking to a relative in the kitchen. "We're so proud of Eric, of course. Clara, well, she's still figuring things out. It's been years and she's still in that artsy phase. We had such high hopes for her." I left early that night, fighting back tears as I drove to my modest hotel room. I promised myself that I would limit family gatherings in the future, focusing instead on building my life and career on my own terms. And so the months passed. I threw myself into my work, taking on whatever clients I could find. Some months were better than others, but I was always just scraping by. I reduced contact with my family to occasional phone calls, making excuses to miss several family events. It was easier that way, less painful than facing their disappointment and Eric's smugness. I thought I had prepared myself for anything they might say or do, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened yesterday. I was hunched over my tablet working on a logo design for a small local bakery when my phone buzzed with a text message. Seeing Eric's name on the screen surprised me, as he rarely reached out directly. Curious, I opened the message only to feel like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Hey, Clara, just letting you know that Mom and Dad decided it's best if you skip the family Christmas gathering this year. Things will be a bit upscale with Dad's new business partners attending. And frankly, Christmas is no place for losers who still can't get their act together at 32. Don't take it personally, it's just better for everyone this way. Maybe next year, if you finally figured out how to be a functioning adult." I read the message 3 times, each time feeling a new wave of shock and hurt wash over me. My fingers trembled as I set the phone down on my desk. The casual cruelty of his words left me breathless. Not invited to Christmas, my own family's celebration, and to be called a loser so dismissively. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I felt my eyes well up with tears as I pushed away from my desk, abandoning the design project mid-process. Pacing around my small apartment, I cycled through emotions rapidly, anger giving way to hurt, then to shame, and back to anger again. Had my entire family agreed to this? Did my parents really think I would embarrass them in front of business associates? Or was this just Eric appointed as the family messenger for an uncomfortable decision? I picked up my phone again, scrolling through recent conversations with my parents. Looking back, I could see subtle signs I had missed. My mother's messages had grown increasingly distant. When I mentioned Christmas plans a few weeks ago, she had been vague about the details. "We're still figuring things out this year. It might be a different kind of celebration," she had written. I had assumed she meant they might change the date or venue, not that they were planning to exclude me entirely. With shaking hands, I called my best friend Jessica. She answered on the second ring, her cheerful voice a stark contrast to my emotional state. "Jess?" I managed my voice breaking. "You won't believe what just happened." I read her Eric's text verbatim, the words still cutting just as deeply the 4th time around. "That absolute jerk!" Jessica exclaimed, her outrage immediate and validating. "Clara, please tell me you're not believing anything he said about you." "It's hard not to," I admitted, sinking down onto my sofa. "Look at me, Jess. I'm 32, living in a tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am a loser." "Stop that right now." Jessica's voice was firm. "You're talented and brave. You chose to follow your passion instead of taking the safe route. That doesn't make you a loser, that makes you authentic. Your brother sounds jealous that you had the courage to forge your own path. Jealous Eric, I laughed bitterly. He has everything, Jess. The career, the house, the perfect life. Perfect on paper doesn't mean perfect in reality, Jessica pointed out. Besides, who defines success anyway? Is it money status? Or is it waking up every day doing something you love? We talked for over an hour, Jessica patiently helping me process my feelings and gain perspective. By the time we hung up, I felt marginally better, though the hurt remained deep. Use this, Clara, Jessica said before we ended the call. Use this as fuel. Show them exactly what you're capable of. After hanging up, I sat in the dark of my apartment, Jessica's words echoing in my mind. The evening stretched into night as I replayed years of interactions with my family, seeing patterns of dismissal and judgment I had normalized for too long. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and began writing, pouring out all the things I had never said to my family. All the times I had swallowed my hurt, accepted their judgment, diminished myself to make them comfortable. I wrote until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped, until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside my window. When I finally crawled into bed, physically and emotionally exhausted, something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but alongside it was something new, something unexpected, a sense of clarity. I woke up late the next morning with a decision firmly in mind. I would not fight their exclusion or beg for a place at their table. I would not argue or plead my case. I reached for my phone and typed a reply to Eric's message, one that I hoped would confuse him more than satisfy him. You're right. Thanks for letting me know. I'll make other plans. Then I set my phone aside, made a strong cup of coffee, and began to plan. If my family wanted to exclude the loser, I would show them exactly what they were missing. Not with words, but with action. Not for their approval, but for myself. It was time to transform this rejection into the motivation I had been needing all along. With a new sense of purpose, I opened my laptop and created a document titled Operation Transformation. This wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It was about finally stepping into my potential and building the life I deserved. First, I created a comprehensive list of potential clients. Over the years, I had made many connections, but had been too insecure to follow up aggressively. I categorized them by industry, noting specific design needs they might have. Local restaurants needing menu redesigns, small businesses requiring brand refreshes, startups looking for distinctive logos. I was surprised by how extensive the list became once I really thought about it. Next, I updated my portfolio, selecting my best work and organizing it in a more professional manner. I had been meaning to do this for months, but had always found reasons to procrastinate. Now, fueled by determination, I worked through the night creating a sleek digital portfolio that showcased my skills and unique artistic perspective. There was one entry on my list that made my heart race whenever I looked at it: Horizon Creative Agency. A prestigious firm that worked with major brands, they represented the kind of opportunity I had always dreamed of, but never felt qualified to pursue. With trembling fingers, I drafted an email to their creative director, attached my portfolio, and before I could talk myself out of it, hit send. With that momentous task completed, I turned my attention to a significant project for my most loyal client, a local bookstore that needed promotional materials for an upcoming author series. Instead of my usual approach of meeting the basic requirements, I decided to exceed expectations, creating a cohesive visual identity for the entire series that would help elevate their brand. Financial stability had always been my greatest struggle as a freelancer. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my bank statements spread before me, I made tough decisions. I canceled subscriptions I rarely used, found a cheaper cell phone plan, and created a strict budget that would allow me to build savings, even if just a small amount each month. The discipline felt empowering rather than restrictive. Through a local online forum, I discovered a support group for freelance creatives that met weekly at a nearby coffee shop. At the first meeting, I was nervous and quiet, but by the end of the session, I had exchanged contact information with several people and received leads on potential collaboration opportunities. The sense of community was exactly what I had been missing. One evening, as I was working late on my bookstore project, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a reminder for the family Christmas party I would no longer be attending. Instead of allowing sadness to overwhelm me, I opened a fresh document and began outlining a 5-year vision for my career and personal life. Where did I want to be? What did I want to accomplish? For the first time, I allowed myself to dream big without the critical voice of my family in my head. Inspired by a conversation from the freelancers group, I began developing a side project that could potentially generate passive income, an online shop selling digital design templates for small businesses. I worked on it during early mornings before my client work, creating templates for social media graphics, business cards, and letterheads that were both professional and affordable. Each day, I pushed myself beyond my comfort zone. I reached out to former clients for testimonials, attended networking events I would have previously avoided, and studied successful designers whose work I admired. I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., establishing a morning routine that included exercise, meditation, and focused work on my most important projects before the distractions of the day could interfere. The rejection that had initially crushed me was transforming into the greatest gift I had ever received. It was freedom from seeking approval that would never come permission to fully commit to my own vision of success. "You'll see," I whispered to myself as I worked late into the night. "You'll all see." 2 weeks after sending my portfolio to Horizon Creative Agency, I received an email that made my heart stop momentarily. The creative director was impressed with my work and wanted to schedule an interview. I read the email 4 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. The interview was set for the following week. I prepared meticulously, researching the agency's clients and projects, practicing answers to potential questions, and selecting my most professional outfit. When the day arrived, I was a bundle of nerves but determined to present my best self. The Horizon office was everything I had imagined, sleek and modern, with creative work displayed proudly on the walls. The creative director, Samantha, was warm but direct as she reviewed my portfolio and asked thoughtful questions about my process and inspirations. "Your work has a distinctive voice," she said, lingering over a series of illustrations I had done for a local brewery. "There's personality here, a point of view. That's what we look for." By the end of the interview, Samantha offered me a contract position working on a campaign for a major outdoor clothing brand. The pay was better than anything I had earned previously, and the exposure could lead to more opportunities within the agency. "We'll start with this project," she explained. "If it goes well, and I expect it will, we can discuss more permanent arrangements." I floated out of the office, barely able to contain my excitement. On the street, I called Jessica, practically shouting the news into my phone. "I knew it!" she exclaimed. "I absolutely knew they would recognize your talent." The good news continued to flow. My bookstore client was thrilled with the promotional materials I created, so much so that they referred me to 3 other businesses in their network. One was a well-established cafe looking for a complete brand refresh, a project that would provide steady income for at least 2 months. As my financial situation improved, I moved from merely scraping by to actually saving money. I opened a separate account specifically for business expenses and future investments, watching with satisfaction as the balance grew steadily. An opportunity arose to participate in a local art exhibition at a gallery that showcased emerging talent. I submitted a series of digital illustrations exploring themes of rejection and resilience work that had emerged from my recent emotional journey. To my surprise, all pieces were accepted for the show. The exhibition opening night was a turning point. Dressed in a vintage dress I had altered myself, I stood nervously beside my displayed work, watching as gallery visitors examined and discussed my illustrations. A distinguished-looking man spent considerable time in front of my centerpiece, a stylized phoenix rising from abstract shapes representing broken expectations. "You're the artist?" he asked, approaching me with genuine interest. His name was Alexander, a local art collector known for supporting emerging talents. We talked for nearly an hour about my techniques and inspirations. By the end of the evening, he had purchased 2 pieces at prices that left me momentarily speechless. "I'll be following your career with interest," he said as he handed me his card. "Your work speaks to something authentic and universal." The validation from someone who understood art on such a deep level was more meaningful than any approval I had ever sought from my family. That night, I added the gallery show to my professional website, along with photos of the event and quotes from visitors who had connected with my work. The following week, I was featured in a local arts magazine, a small write-up, but one that increased my visibility in the creative community. Client inquiries began to come in more regularly, allowing me to be more selective about the projects I accepted. It was during this time that I met Michael at a photography exhibition. Tall, with thoughtful eyes, he approached me after overhearing my conversation with another guest about digital composition techniques. As a professional photographer specializing in architectural and landscape images, he had a perspective on visual storytelling that complemented my own. Our conversation extended to coffee after the exhibition and then dinner later that week. Michael was interested in my work, asking insightful questions and offering genuine admiration for my creative process. It was refreshing to be with someone who saw my artistic career as valuable and significant. "My parents wanted me to be an engineer," he shared over dinner. "It took years for them to accept that photography wasn't just a phase." I felt an immediate connection in our shared experience of pursuing creative paths despite family pressure. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel hopeful about a relationship. Michael respected my ambition and understood the dedication required for creative work. We began seeing each other regularly, our professional lives enriching our personal connection. As November turned to December, I realized with some surprise that I was happier than I had been in years. My career was gaining momentum. My financial situation had stabilized, and I had found someone who appreciated me for exactly who I was. The family Christmas party, which had once been the source of such pain, now seemed like a distant concern. Then, one morning in early December, an email arrived that brought all those feelings rushing back. The email from my mother arrived on a Tuesday morning, its subject line a simple Christmas plans. With a deep breath, I opened it, uncertain what to expect. "Clara, dear," it began with forced casualness. "Your father and I have been thinking about Christmas, and we wanted to let you know that you're welcome to join us if you'd like. I know things have been strained, but it is the holidays after all. Eric mentioned you might have other plans, but we wanted to extend the invitation. Things will be quite formal as your father has invited business associates, so please dress appropriately if you decide to come." I stared at the screen, reading between the lines of this lukewarm invitation. The implication was clear. We're giving you a chance despite your shortcomings, so be grateful, and don't embarrass us. There was no acknowledgement of Eric's hurtful message, no apology for excluding me in the first place. My first instinct was to decline immediately, or simply not respond at all. But as I sat with the email open on my screen, a different idea began to take shape. For years, I had allowed my family to define me by their standards, to make me feel smaller and less valuable because I chose a different path. Perhaps it was time to reframe this narrative. My family had no idea about my recent successes, the contract with Horizon, the gallery exhibition, my improving financial situation. They were still operating under the assumption that I was struggling and unsuccessful, their loser daughter who couldn't get her act together. What if instead of avoiding them or fighting with them, I simply showed up as my authentic, successful self? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I composed a brief, polite response accepting the invitation and mentioning that I would bring a guest. I provided no details about my recent achievements or who would accompany me. Let them be surprised. Over the next few weeks, I prepared for the Christmas confrontation with the same meticulousness I applied to client projects. I selected an outfit that was both elegant and distinctively me, a deep green dress that conveyed professionalism while allowing my personal style to shine through. I spent hours selecting thoughtful gifts for each family member, items that demonstrated both consideration and, yes, financial stability. For my father, a limited edition book on architectural design from the 1920s, his secret passion. For my mother, a handcrafted silk scarf from an artisan I had collaborated with, along with a spa package from the upscale wellness center she had often mentioned. For Eric and his wife, I commissioned a custom wine rack from a woodworker friend, knowing they prided themselves on their wine collection. Each gift was carefully wrapped and tagged, placed in a stylish bag that I set aside by my door, ready for the journey to my parents' home. The most important preparation, however, was mental. I rehearsed responses to potential criticisms, practiced maintaining my composure in the face of dismissive comments, and reminded myself repeatedly that my worth was not determined by my family's approval. When I asked Michael to accompany me to the Christmas gathering, I was honest about the situation. My family is challenging, I explained. They think I'm a failure, and this will be my first time seeing them since my brother essentially called me a loser and uninvited me from Christmas. Michael listened intently as I shared the details of my family dynamics and my plan to attend despite the initial rejection. Are you sure you want to go? He asked gently. You don't owe them your presence. I'm not going for them, I replied with newfound certainty. I'm going for me, to close this chapter on my terms. On Christmas Eve, Michael picked me up in his well-maintained sedan. He looked handsome in a tailored charcoal suit, his usually casual photographer aesthetic transformed into something more formal, but still authentic to him. You look beautiful, he said as I emerged from my apartment building with the bag of gifts. And incredibly strong. Remember, I'm right beside you all night. The drive to my parents' suburban home was filled with lighter conversation and the occasional navigational instruction. As we turned onto their street decorated with elaborate Christmas displays, I felt my anxiety rising. We don't have to stay long if it gets uncomfortable, Michael reassured me, sensing my tension. My parents' house was lit up with professional-grade holiday decorations, the kind featured in home magazines. Luxury cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street. I recognized Eric's sleek black sedan, parked prominently near the front door. Michael found a spot a little way down the street. Before we got out of the car, he squeezed my hand. Remember who you are now, he said, not who they think you are. With gifts in hand and Michael by my side, I walked up the familiar path to my childhood home. Through the front windows, I could see people in elegant attire mingling in the living room. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. My mother answered her surprise at seeing me evident despite the invitation she had extended. She wore an expensive-looking black cocktail dress, her hair and makeup flawlessly done. "Clara," she said, her voice betraying her shock. "You came." "Merry Christmas, Mom," I replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "This is Michael. Michael, my mother, Diana." Michael stepped forward with practiced charm, complimenting her on the beautiful home and thanking her for including him in the family celebration. My mother, always proper with guests, switched into hostess mode, welcoming him warmly while giving me a quick assessing glance. As we entered the living room, I spotted my father in conversation with two men in business suits. He did a double take when he saw me excusing himself to come greet us. "Clara," he said, a question in his voice. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." "I wouldn't miss Christmas, Dad," I replied with a smile that I hoped concealed my nervousness. "This is Michael, my guest." The two men exchanged firm handshakes, my father clearly impressed by Michael's confident demeanor. When I mentioned that Michael was a professional photographer whose work had been featured in several major magazines, My father's eyebrows raised slightly. "Is that so?" he said, suddenly more interested. "Which publications?" As Michael listed several prestigious magazines and described his recent exhibition in New York. I caught my mother watching the interaction with confusion. This was not proceeding according to script. I wasn't playing my assigned role of the struggling, awkward daughter. Then I saw Eric across the room, his expression darkening as he noticed me. He whispered something to his wife, who glanced over with undisguised curiosity. Setting down his drink, he made his way toward us, his stance confrontational. "Clara," he said coldly, "didn't expect to see you here." "Eric?" I nodded, maintaining my composure. "Merry Christmas." "What happened to other plans?" he asked with a smirk, making air quotes around the phrase. "I rearranged them when Mom extended the invitation," I replied evenly. "This is Michael, by the way. Michael, my brother Eric." Eric gave Michael a dismissive once-over before turning back to me. "So, still drawing pictures for a living? Or did you finally get a real job?" The old me would have flushed with shame, mumbled something defensive, and retreated to a quiet corner for the remainder of the evening. But I was no longer that person. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear enough that nearby guests could hear, "I recently signed a contract with Horizon Creative Agency to lead design for their new outdoor apparel campaign. You might recognize some of their previous work for major national brands." Eric's smug expression faltered. My father, who had been half listening while greeting another guest, turned back with sudden interest. "Horizon Creative?" he asked. "The agency that did that remarkable campaign for Alpine Technologies last year." "The very same," I confirmed. "I'm also exhibiting my personal work at the West Side Gallery, 2 pieces sold on opening night to Alexander Rowe." My mother gasped softly. Even she, with minimal interest in the art world, recognized the name of the prominent collector. "And I've established a consistent client base that allows me to be selective about the projects I take on." I continued, a weight lifting from my shoulders with each accomplishment I shared. It turns out that drawing pictures can indeed be a viable career when you approach it with professionalism and dedication. The room had grown quieter, with several nearby guests now openly listening to our exchange. Eric's face had transformed from smugness to something approaching disbelief, while my parents exchanged glances that contained equal parts confusion and reassessment. It was time for the final act in my carefully planned evening. I reached into the bag I had been carrying. "I brought gifts," I said simply. "Shall we put them under the tree?" "Gifts? Oh, of course," my mother said, composing herself quickly and gesturing toward the lavishly decorated Christmas tree in the corner. "That's very thoughtful of you, Clara." I pulled out the elegantly wrapped packages, each with personalized gift tags. My mother's eyes widened slightly as she noted the high-quality wrapping and ribbons, another small detail in my carefully orchestrated presentation. "Michael, would you mind helping me distribute these?" I asked, handing him several packages. As we placed the gifts under the tree, I could feel eyes following us. The narrative was shifting in real time. The struggling daughter had arrived composed and successful with an accomplished partner and expensive-looking gifts. It wasn't the script anyone had expected. Eric remained nearby, his earlier bravado diminished, but not entirely gone. "A good month of freelancing doesn't make a career," he muttered, just loudly enough for me to hear. "Don't get ahead of yourself." I straightened up from arranging the gifts and faced him directly. "You're right, Eric. A good month doesn't make a career. But 3 years of building a business, developing my skills, and staying true to my passion does. I may not have taken the conventional path, but I've created something meaningful on my own terms." Before he could respond, my mother announced that dinner was ready. We moved into the formal dining room, where place cards indicated assigned seating. I noticed with some amusement that Michael and I had been placed at the far end of the table, away from my father's business associates. Another detail in their plan that no longer mattered. Throughout the elaborate meal, conversation flowed around business, local politics, and carefully polite small talk. Michael charmed those seated near us, discussing everything from photography techniques to architectural trends with genuine interest and knowledge. I watched my mother's expression shift from cautious observation to reluctant admiration as the evening progressed. After dinner, my father suggested opening family gifts before the business associates departed. We gathered in the living room where my mother began distributing packages from under the tree. When my father opened his architectural book, his surprise was evident. He ran his fingers over the embossed cover, examining the detailed illustrations with genuine appreciation. "This is remarkable, Clara," he said, looking up at me with new eyes. "How did you know about my interest in Art Deco architecture?" "I remember the books you used to keep in your study," I replied. "The ones you said were just reference materials, but that I noticed you reading late at night when everyone else was asleep." Something passed between us, then a moment of recognition that perhaps he had never truly known me, and I had seen more of him than he realized. My mother was speechless when she unwrapped her gifts, especially when she realized the scarf was a collaboration between me and a textile artist whose work she had admired in magazines. "This is exquisite," she said softly, running the silk between her fingers. "Truly beautiful work, Clara." Eric and his wife received their custom wine rack with polite thanks, though I could see the calculation in his eyes as he tried to determine its value and significance. When all the family gifts had been opened, I expected the moment to pass. Instead, my cousin Amanda, who had been quietly observing the evening's dynamics, spoke up. "Clara, I've been following your work online," she said. "The series you did exploring urban landscapes was incredible. I've always admired your courage in pursuing your passion." Her words hung in the air, an unexpected public endorsement from within the family ranks. Several relatives murmured agreement, with an aunt mentioning she had seen my name in the local arts magazine. "You've been an inspiration, actually," Amanda continued, looking slightly embarrassed but determined. "I've started taking photography classes because of you. Seeing you build your creative career made me realize it's never too late to pursue what you love." I felt a lump form in my throat, unprepared for this show of support. "Thank you, Amanda. That means more than you know." My mother, perhaps sensing the shift in the room, quickly redirected attention to dessert and coffee. As people began to disperse, Eric approached me alone, his expression unreadable. "Can we talk?" he asked, nodding toward the back porch. "Privately." Curious and cautious, I followed him outside. The night air was crisp, our breath forming small clouds in the darkness. For a moment, we stood in silence, looking out at the yard where we had played as children. "I lost my job," Eric finally said, the words clearly difficult for him. 3 weeks ago. Downsizing, they called it." I turned to look at him, surprised both by the admission and the vulnerability in his voice. "I haven't told Mom and Dad yet," he continued, "or anyone else. I've been interviewing, but nothing has come through. The text I sent you, I was drunk and angry. Not at you, really. At myself." "Eric." "No, let me finish," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I've spent my whole life doing exactly what was expected of me. The right school, the right career, the right wife. And now that it's falling apart, I realize I don't know who I am without those external markers of success." He laughed bitterly. "And then you show up tonight, having done everything wrong according to our parents' rule book, and you're thriving. You know who you are. You built something real." I didn't know how to respond. After years of feeling inferior to Eric, to suddenly be the object of his envy was disorienting. "I'm sorry about the text," he said finally. "It was cruel and untrue." "It was," I agreed, not willing to minimize the hurt it had caused. But in a strange way, it was also the push I needed. It made me stop seeking approval and start proving something to myself instead. We talked for nearly an hour on that cold porch, more honestly than we had in years. I learned about the pressure he felt to maintain his image of success, the growing dissatisfaction with his career path, the marriage that looked perfect on the outside, but was strained by expectations and appearances. In turn, I shared the struggles and joys of building my creative business, the freedom and anxiety of forging an unconventional path, the recent successes that had validated my choices. When we finally returned inside, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. As Michael and I prepared to leave later that evening, my mother pulled me aside. "Your work is beautiful, Clara," she said quietly. "I've never really looked at it before, not properly. I was too busy worrying about whether you could support yourself." "Thank you, Mom," I replied, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "I have a friend who runs a boutique downtown," she continued hesitantly. "She's been looking for someone to redesign her branding. Would it be all right if I gave her your contact information?" It was a small gesture, but for my mother, it represented a significant acknowledgement of my professional capabilities. "I'd appreciate that," I said sincerely. As we drove away from my parents' house, Michael reached over and squeezed my hand. "You were amazing in there," he said. "How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. "Free," I finally answered. "For the first time in that house, I feel free." The months following that transformative Christmas brought changes I could never have anticipated. My mother not only connected me with her boutique owner friend, but became something of an unexpected champion for my work, mentioning my design services to her extensive social network. Several new clients came through these connections, including a high-end real estate agency that hired me for a complete visual rebrand. My father, intrigued by my success with Horizon Creative, began asking thoughtful questions about my business model and growth strategy. During one Sunday phone call, he surprised me by offering advice on setting up an LLC and maximizing tax benefits for my freelance work. It was the first time he had treated my career with professional respect rather than worried tolerance. Perhaps the most significant change was with Eric. His initial confession on Christmas night had opened a door between us that had been closed for years. In January, I helped him update his resume and professional profiles as he searched for new employment. In February, when he was offered a position with a smaller firm at a lower salary than his previous job, we had a long conversation about measuring success beyond financial metrics. "I'm actually excited about this role," he admitted during one of our newly established weekly phone calls. "It's more hands-on, less political. I think I might be good at it." "You will be," I assured him. "And if it doesn't work out, that's okay too. Starting over isn't failure, it's evolution." My own career continued to flourish. The campaign I designed for Horizon received industry recognition, leading to an offer of permanent employment. After careful consideration, I declined the full-time position, but negotiated a retainer arrangement that provided steady income while allowing me to maintain my independence and other clients. With financial stability came the opportunity to expand my creative horizons. I leased a small studio space in an arts district, a light-filled room where I could work on larger projects and occasionally host client meetings. The space quickly became my sanctuary, decorated with inspiration boards and works in progress. My relationship with Michael deepened as we supported each other's creative endeavors. He understood the unpredictable rhythms of artistic work, the intense focus required for certain projects, and the need for space to experiment and sometimes fail. We moved in together in the spring, finding a charming apartment with enough room for both his photography equipment and my design workspace. Inspired by my own journey and the conversations with Eric, I started a mentorship program for young designers, particularly those from backgrounds where creative careers weren't encouraged. Once a month, I opened my studio to students and early career artists, offering portfolio reviews, business advice, and honest conversations about the challenges and rewards of creative entrepreneurship. "You're good at this," Michael observed after sitting in on one of these sessions. You should consider teaching a formal course. The suggestion led to a part-time position teaching a professional practices course at a local art college, adding another dimension to my career and further stabilizing my income. As summer turned to fall, I found myself reflecting on the incredible journey of the past year. The text message that had initially devastated me had become the catalyst for the most profound growth of my adult life. By freeing myself from the need for family approval, I had finally accessed my full potential, both creatively and personally. When Thanksgiving approached, I decided to host dinner at my new apartment, inviting my parents, Eric and his wife, and a few close friends, including Jessica, who had supported me through the darkest moments of the previous year. "Are you sure about this?" Jessica asked when I told her my plans. "That's a big step." "I'm sure," I replied confidently. "It's time to create new traditions, ones where everyone is valued for who they are, not what they achieve." To my surprise and delight, everyone accepted the invitation. The dinner wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension and old patterns threatened to emerge, but we navigated them with newfound awareness and respect. As Christmas approached, my mother called to discuss plans. "We'd love to have you and Michael join us again," she said. "Last year's celebration was enlightening for all of us. Your father and I have done some reflecting on how we've approached family gatherings in the past." "I'd like that," I replied. "But this year, I'd like to contribute more than just my presence. Maybe I could help with the decorations. Bring a dish?" "I'd appreciate that," my mother said, her voice warming. "Your artistic touch would be wonderful." When December arrived, I found myself looking forward to the holiday season for the first time in years. My studio was busy with year-end projects, my relationship was thriving, and my family relationships, while still evolving, had reached a place of mutual respect I had once thought impossible. As I wrapped gifts for my family, I reflected on the journey of the past year, from exclusion to empowerment, from hurt to healing. The greatest gift had been discovering my own worth, independent of external validation or conventional definitions of success. Christmas Eve at my parents' home was markedly different from the previous year. The gathering was smaller, more intimate, with fewer business associates and more actual connection. I had helped my mother create simple, elegant decorations that reflected genuine warmth rather than magazine perfection. Eric, more relaxed in his new job and more authentic in his interactions, pulled me aside during the evening. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up on me even when I was awful to you." "That's what family should be," I replied. "Supporting each other through changes and challenges, not just celebrating successes." As I looked around the room at my family, imperfect but trying, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, but I had found my footing and my voice. The greatest lesson I had learned was that true value comes not from external validation or conventional markers of success, but from living authentically and courageously. Sometimes, rejection becomes redirection to a path more aligned with our true selves. Sometimes, the doors that close lead us to discover windows we never would have found otherwise. Being excluded from Christmas last year had been painful, but it had pushed me to create a life defined by my own standards rather than others' expectations. In losing my place at the family table, I had found myself, and that was worth celebrating. What about you? Have you ever had a painful rejection turn into an unexpected blessing? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and resilience. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that rejection often leads to redirection. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth is never determined by others' opinions of you.